Welcome to week 10, everyone. This week we are focusing on form poetry. So I want to introduce you to a bunch of different forms that you might try out, experiment with, or see in what you're reading. So for a warm-up, I'd like you to try to write a cento composed of 4 lines from your text, When My Brother Was an Aztec. You can pick lines that you're drawn to, lines that have a certain theme connected to them, maybe lines that include the word light bulb, right? That comes up a lot in the book. Or lines that contain the color red or orange, which comes up a lot in the book. So go ahead and try your cento and then come back to the video. One of the things we want to think about this week also, alongside trying new forms, is revising our poetry. So our goal at the end of the semester is to revise your work for your portfolio and also to possibly publish some of your work or send it out to publications. So it's important that you start on this process now so that the last 2 weeks of the semester you're not overwhelmed with revision. So if I've given you comments on a poem, or if you've gotten feedback from other people, or maybe you just want to make some of your own choices, feel free to do that and get started on that process now. Make sure you save your drafts as you go, because you'll turn in your drafts with your portfolio so I can see the ways that your poem has developed. Revision often feels like an experiment, and I want you to go into it with that kind of perspective and that goal. You want to see what would happen if I changed the line breaks. What would happen if I made it rhyme? What would happen if I took rhyme out? What would happen if I took out all the articles in the poem? What would happen if I added more punctuation? Like, just play around with it and see how different elements of poetic craft can help enhance your meaning in a poem. Don't be afraid of messing it up or losing that original authenticity. Sometimes, honestly, I write a poem and then I revise it and then I have 2 poems, because you're like, wow, this just became something completely different. Or maybe I made it better and it did change the initial feeling, changed because I changed with it. So it's okay to experiment, it's okay to mess things up and just see what happens and then see what you think after you can have some space and look at your work as a whole and see which version do I like the best of this poem. Here are I'm going to go through 3 example form poems. The first is a Pantoum, and an example is on page 43 of When My Brother Was an Aztec. It's called My Brother at 3 a.m. Students tend to be drawn to this poem without knowing it's a Pantoum. And so the Pantoum is a poem of any length, so you can have as many stanzas as you want, but each stanza has to be 4 lines, and the second and fourth lines of the stanza serve as the first and third of the next stanza. And then the last line of the Pantoum is often the same as the very first line of the poem. So you can see, if you look at that example in your book, you can see how the repetition is used and how the second and fourth lines of the stanza then become the first and third lines of the next stanza. I find this form very fun to write because you have to take a line and recreate it in the next stanza and find new connections between those lines than you did in the previous one. So I think that's kind of fun. The next poem I want to talk about is the Villanelle. This one's hard, I think. I've written Villanelles before, and it's hard to make it all fit, but it's also very fun. It's very structured. It has 19 lines, 2 repeating rhymes, and 2 refrains. So there are 5 tercets, which is 5 stanzas of 3 lines, followed by the last stanza of the poem is a quatrain. That means it has 4 lines. Okay, so you have 5 stanzas with 3 lines each, and then 1 stanza at the end with 4 lines. Okay, here's the complexness of it. The first and third lines of the opening tercet are repeated alternately in the last lines of the succeeding stanzas. Then in the final stanza, the refrain serves as the poem's two concluding lines. I'm going to show you an example. So using capitals for refrains and lowercase letters for rhymes, the form would be as this. So this is the capital letters are the refrain. So those are those repeating lines, the first and third lines of the opening tercet. So it would be like this, and then you have the rhyme schemes in here as well. Let's look at an example. This is Do Not Go Gentle Into That Good Night by Dylan Thomas. So you can see we have 3 lines, 3 lines, 3 lines, 3 lines, 3 lines, quatrain here. Okay. This line here is the third line of, I'm sorry, this line here is the first line of the stanza. So that line is going to be repeated here. And this is the third line, so that's going to be repeated here. You can see how they're repeated, right? So it's the first and third lines are repeated. Do not go, rage, rage, do not go, rage, rage. And then they're here at the end beside each other. Do not go, rage, rage. Okay? And then you can also take a look at the different rhyme schemes. You see how it's A, B, A, A, B, A, A, B, A, A, B, A. And maybe you don't know what I'm talking about when I say A, B, A. So the A lines rhyme with each other. Night, light, right, night. Then those middle lines are going to rhyme. Day, they, bay, way, gay, pray. See how they did that? So you have to have that rhyme scheme, and you have to have this exact repetition to meet the form for a villanelle. One more. Some people pronounce this Ghazal. Some people pronounce it Ghazal. So you number your poem stanzas 1 to 5 and make sure you meet the minimum of 5 stanzas. You can go as high as 15 stanzas, but it says maybe start out slowly, maybe start with 5 your first try. Each stanza will include 2 lines or a couplet. So you'll have 5 stanzas of 2 lines. Each couplet should be able to stand alone, like it's its own poem and has its own meaning. So this is good. You don't have that extra pressure to create a narrative. You want each to stand its own. Every line is traditionally the same length. It says that English writers are forgiven this task, people who are writing in English, but usually the lines are the same length. In the first line of the last couplet, the poet can put him or herself in there. So you put like I or your name in there. And the first couplet, each line should end with the same word. After that, the second line in each couplet should end with the same word. Does that make sense? So you're repeating those ending words in the 5 stanzas so that you have this repetition of the ending of lines throughout the poem. Okay, so those are the 3 forms I wanted to show you today. We're also learning about found poetry and exploring that some more. So there's a lot of directions we can go with form poetry. The thing I like about form poetry is sometimes it feels restricting to people, but I took a class in college on just form poetry. So we just did forms the whole semester. No free verse. It was all forms. And I found it was actually very freeing to have a form. It's almost like when you write an essay, but you do a good outline beforehand, you don't really have to worry about the structure. You have to just worry about the content. It's the same idea. You don't have to worry about the structure because it has been predetermined for you. But what you do get to then focus on is more of the creative content. All right, so give form a try this week. See what you think. There's obviously other forms. You probably have heard of the sonnet, the haiku. There's lots of other ways we can go with form, but I thought maybe these were 3 you wouldn't have been as familiar with. All right, have a good week.